Chapter 8. Picket Line at Piper. The Upper Amazon mission invited Bob and Elena Seamont to help meet the needs of the expanding air ministry. Bob, a pilot, pastor, and former member of the King's Herald Quartet, would direct the growing air program. Since no house was available, the Seamonts moved into a room in the hangar. With 2 pilots, another plane became top priority. While the Seamonts were getting settled and studying Spanish, Clyde went to the States to pick up a Piper Cub. "I'll be back in Peru in a week," he told Bob. Unfortunately, the Piper factory went on a strike the morning Clyde arrived for the scheduled delivery. Picket lines had formed, blocking the release of any plane from the factory. "We urgently need the plane," Clyde thought as he left the plant in disappointment. "What shall I do?" he asked himself. "I don't have time to waste." While waiting to decide what to do next, he went on to the nearby Lycoming engine plant and enrolled in an engine overhaul course. That took several days, but the strike at Piper continued. Later, while walking around the airport, he spotted William T. Piper himself. Clyde stepped up to the elderly Piper Company founder and owner and introduced himself. "I'm a mission pilot from the Amazon jungle of Peru. Let's walk off to the side so I can hear about your work," Mr. Piper suggested. "Most jungle areas have no roads," Clyde explained. "By using a small plane, we've opened up dozens of schools in remote areas where children have never had a chance to learn to read and write. When medical emergencies arise, we use the plane to take a medical professional or fly patients out to a hospital." "I like what you're doing," the elderly man commented. "We ordered a new Piper Cub," Peters explained, "and I came all the way from South America to pick it up. I've already been waiting for a week, and I really need to get back to my work in the jungle." "This is a tough strike," Mr. Piper scowled. "It may last a long time. Give me a phone number where you can be reached. If there's anything I can do, I'll give you a call." Later, back in his motel room, Clyde answered the phone. "Please meet me at the airport the first thing in the morning," the aircraft company owner requested. "Be sure to bring everything you will need to take with you." When the man arrived, he had all the paperwork for the purchased aircraft. "Your airplane is OBM 786. I'll tell you exactly where it is. Its tanks will have a few gallons of fuel." They drove to the back of the Piper property next to the aircraft. 50 acres of airplanes surrounded by a high fence sat wing to wing. Picketing continued on the factory side of the storage area. "I may get into a lot of trouble for this," Piper said. "If you want this plane, you've got to get in and fly it out." They stopped at the big gate. The factory owner sent in an aide to open it, then handed Clyde the keys to the new aircraft. "You're on your own from here on out." Clyde knew differently. "I'm not on my own," he told himself. "The Lord's with me. This is the only plane to be delivered since the strike began more than a week ago." After checking the plane, Peter started the engine and taxied down between rows of new planes. He increased power with the light load of fuel, and the new Super Cub lifted off the ground in seconds and turned away from the strikers determined to keep the plant closed. Amazing, Clyde thought. Mr. Piper said big corporations offered large sums of money to have their plane delivered, and his factory managers refused to take the risk, but he personally risked delivering a plane for God's work in Peru. He flew to the nearest airport 20 miles away, filled his tanks, and took off for Lincoln, Nebraska. Old friends helped him install radio and navigation equipment in a 60-gallon belly tank for additional fuel. With everything ready, he headed straight to Peru, arriving in time for a youth congress being conducted on the campus of the Inca Union College. The little Piper Cub, equipped with a large Tundra tires, landed on the college farm. A special ceremony dedicated the plane with the name Ricardo Hayden in honor of the pioneer missionary Elder and Mrs. Richard Hayden, who had joined the stalls at the Amazon headwaters in 1931. Following the dedication, Clyde piloted the tiny Ricardo Hayden up over the Andes to the air base near Pucallpa. "God worked a miracle," he told Eleanor. "Without the kindness of Mr. Piper, I'd still be waiting for the plane. With 2 planes, Bob and I will be able to take the gospel to many new areas." About this time, a band of guerrilla terrorists, inspired by Che Guevara, plagued the jungle city of Stipio. They blew up a bank, stole money from businesses, and shot civilians. The terrorists fled when the president of Peru sent commandos to stop the violence. In hot pursuit, the soldiers flew to Puerto Bueniza and took a boat up the Patachi River to the Navati mission station. Bad weather grounded Clyde and the Ricardo Hayden at Navati the evening they arrived. The commandos believed the terrorists had escaped into the rugged Grand Pajonal and carried a map showing all the Adventist airstrips. Their leader approached Clyde. "Captain Peters, you are to fly us into the Grand Pajonal tomorrow morning. This is not a request, it's an order. Do you understand?" Clyde eyed the men, heavily armed with automatic weapons and plenty of ammunition. "This is the last thing I want to do." He faced a perplexing situation. "If I fly commandos and they start shooting, some of our new believers may get caught in the crossfires. What will they think, knowing the killers came in the mission plane?" "You know," Clyde said, "I'm here now because Navati is socked in with bad weather. Who knows what it'll be like tomorrow? You may not even be able to go anyplace." In the meantime, Clyde consulted with the mission station director. "We'll be in trouble if we don't accommodate these men sent by the government. Yet we may have problems if we do." They both agreed, though, that the better judgment would be to provide the transportation. Before going to bed, Clyde prayed, "Lord, please give us bad weather if you don't want me to fly the commandos. I want to do your will." At dawn, Clyde looked out to the Grand Pajonal. He could see all the way back into the Andes. The sky is crystal clear, he told the commandos. I'll take you. But please be careful around the Adventist villages. We don't want any of our people injured. 3 men carrying pistols, hand grenades, and automatic weapons squeezed into the back of the plane. Clyde had already filled the fuel tanks to maximum capacity. As the sun rose, they took off toward the Grand Pajonal. Suddenly, 2 miles out, a temperature and dew point situation developed, turning the clear atmosphere into a blanket of dense fog. In seconds, Peter began flying on instruments. He turned and started to lose altitude, hoping to find his way back to Navati. With no sign of the river, he just flew over. He said, "It's impossible to fly back to Navati. I'm going to climb over this fog and head for Ovincia in the Grand Pajonal." Still inside a thick cloud after an hour of flying, he calculated by the instruments they were near Ovinci. For half an hour, Clyde searched for openings to land but found none. "We've been flying for 1.5 hours, he told the soldiers. "You can see the situation we're in. In all my years of flying, I've never seen dense clouds form so fast. We'll fly over to Perini, it's always open over there." They soared for another hour over a solid sea of clouds. Clyde climbed up to 9,000 feet, still heavy fog. He turned to the men. "I've got to turn around. There are high mountains ahead. We don't dare fly around the mountains when you can't see. We'll go to the Ucali River on the eastern side of the Andes and try to land at Uni." Another hour and no sign of Uni. "We must be over the Ucali," Clyde reported, "but with no radio, beacons, or navigation aids of any kind, I can't be sure." "We don't want to die," Captain Peters, the commandos pleaded. "Please get us back on the ground." What should have been a 20-minute flight on a clear day already lasted 2.5 hours of flying on instruments without a single crack on the clouds. "The best thing we can do is fly back over Perini," Clyde said. "It's later now and we should find some breaks." He glanced back as the 3 pale-faced men took out their crucifixes, crossed themselves and prayed. Clyde smiled. "You'd better pray." This unusual weather has put us in a very serious situation. I appreciate their prayers, Clyde thought, but it's almost comical. One man, sure he would die, prayed out loud, "Oh Lord, forgive me for the way I've treated my mother." Clyde crossed back over the Grand Pajonal. "Listen, men, we've flown 3 hours now and the plane carries fuel for only 4. There's a small village northwest of Sapki, where the real high Andes begin." The commandos in the back of the plane with their automatic weapons cried like babies. Clyde silently prayed, "Lord, our fuel is getting low and I'm not coming up with answers. I've tried every way I know to find a clearing where we can get down out of the clouds and land. Nothing's worked. We're dangerously close to the mountains. It's time for you to take over." Turning to the terrified men, Clyde said, "Keep praying. God knows how to get this plane back on the ground." But with zero visibility. 5 minutes later, they encountered a hole 200 feet wide that opened like a big funnel in the clouds. Directly below lay an airstrip. When Clyde banked the plane, he couldn't find the opening again. "Dear Lord, I still need your help. Please help me find the way down to the ground." In seconds, he saw the hole, cut the power, and put the plane in a 90-degree spiral. The commandos screamed as if they were going out of their minds. The little plane pulled out under the clouds and Clyde put it gently down on the dirt runway. 3 armed men jumped out and bent down and kissed the ground. "We'll sit here till the weather clears," Clyde announced. The commandos had another idea. "We're going to stay right here. We don't want to fly anymore." The men who had shortly before prayed for their very lives now marched off to a tavern and got so drunk they couldn't stand up. Clyde waited on the runway. God controls the weather. Even the clouds obey him. We didn't get in trouble with government by refusing to transport these men, and we didn't land the Grand Pajonal where they could have caused problems for our work. Flying home after the weather cleared that afternoon, Clyde thought of the need to keep up to date with his skydiving skills. He talked with Bob. "I haven't jumped for a long time. There may be an emergency when I need to use my parachute. As the only pilot at the base, I couldn't jump, but with you here, I'd like to practice jumping." "Good idea, Clyde," Bob said. "You know, we have camp meetings scheduled for Navati and Uni. The mission station's director could announce that you'll jump out of an airplane and that could create interest and increase the attendance." At Navati, Clyde jumped just after a late afternoon meeting. Horrified campers hid their faces, sure he would end up splattered on the ground. Then they leaped and laughed when the parachute opened and he floated down out of the sky, landing right on target. Pastors explained how exciting it will be when Jesus comes down through the eastern sky at the second coming. At Uni, Siegfried spread the word that Clyde would jump out of a plane during its camp meeting. Indians living in distant villages walked for days to reach the mission station. 3 years have passed since the Fernando Stau first landed in the Grand Pajonal. Marchevi, the wife of the chief at Chivincia, was one of the first persons Bob Simon baptized after arriving in Peru. Her husband, Shaiwingo, wanted to be baptized, but he had 2 wives. At last, he chose to keep his wife, Marvinci, and let the younger woman go. Turning from witchcraft, he stopped sipping tobacco juice, then prayed to the God of Heaven for forgiveness for murdering 4 men. Shawingo guided the Da Vinci group on a long journey over the rugged trail to Uni camp meeting. At mealtime, he always led his people in saying the blessing for the food. Every morning at 6 a.m., the Indians conducted prayer bands, impressing the missionaries with the fact that all the children from Tavincia knew how to pray. At noon on Friday, Clyde surprised the camp meeting crowd by parachuting to the Unini airstrip. The next day, the worshippers rejoiced when Shawing, chief of Tavincia, was baptized in the Unini River. Oscar, son of Chief Honko from the Grand Pajonal, followed Jesus in baptism too. On Sunday, Bob Seamont flew into Vincia and baptized 10 more. Sometime later, the mayor of Uringmas, a jungle city with more than 50,000 inhabitants, planned a Sentinel celebration and contacted the local pastor. "We want Adventists to take part as we commemorate the founding of our city. Besides having fireworks, we've invited many organizations to participate and want Adventists to do something special." The request perplexed Pastor Alamonia. He asked his wife, "What can our church do for a big worldly celebration like this?" Then they got an idea and sent a telegram to the Adventist Air Base. "We want Clyde Peters to do a parachute jump for the Uringmas Centennial." Peters talked over with Seamont. Their work had been limited to reaching tribes. Although not a normal activity, here was a chance to do something in a city and give its people opportunity to hear about Seventh-day Adventists. People came from everywhere. More than 100,000 crowded into the streets. At the edge of the town, 40,000 jammed to the stadium for a soccer game. "Senor Peters, I want you to jump into the stadium," the mayor said. Bob flew 10,000 feet and Clyde, with a 100-pound sack of flour, dove out of the Ricardo Hayden, leaving a beautiful white streak in the sky. The game on the ground stopped as everyone looked up. Peruvians love their red and white flags. At about 2,000 feet, Clyde pulled his ripcord and a brilliant red and white parachute popped open. Crowds yelled and screamed as Clyde turned and floated over the field twice, then turned again and landed in the middle of the stadium. Thousands of people poured out of the town toward the stadium, and spectators in the bleachers rushed to the playing field. The police found themselves powerless to hold them back. The crowd surrounded Clyde, pushing closer and closer. He struggled to stand up. "Lord," he prayed, "save me from being crushed to death." The huge crowds outside hit the stadium wall, and it crumbled like paper. "This crazy mob is out of control. Everyone wants to touch me." The excited mass of people knocked Clyde down and trampled on him. He wrestled to get up again and finally managed to pull the parachute into his arms. As he walked to Pastor Almonio's house, 50,000 people jammed the streets behind him. That evening, the mayor visited and said, "Several hundred men are working all night to repair the stadium. We want you to jump again tomorrow." The red and white parachute falling out of the blue sky is the greatest thing that ever happened to our city. When the mayor promised more security to control the crowds, Clyde agreed to jump again. The next morning, the stadium filled to capacity, and thousands more crowded outside. Climbing to 10,000 feet for another spectacular jump, Clyde chatted with Seamont. "I wonder what the city is like 100 years ago. Probably only a few people," Bob commented. "One thing's sure, there were no Adventists. Pioneer missionaries like the Stalls and Haydens hadn't come to Peru yet. Now, because of the work they started, we have more than 4,000 believers in the upper Amazon." Leaving Bob in the plane, Clyde dove through the sky and opened his chute, allowing the bright morning sun to break through the red and white canopy. Then, in horror, he watched as the mass of people below became out of control again. The mayor's security forces were no match for the excited crowd. Clyde crossed over the stadium twice as the people applauded, then turned and landed outside. The people inside the stadium pushed the walls down, totally demolishing the wooden structure as they tried to reach him on the outside. Clyde, anxious to get back to the plane and fly home with Bob, pulled the parachute into his arms and raced ahead of the crowd all the way to the airport. The mayor came to thank him for the Adventist participation in the celebration. "Don't worry about the stadium," he said. "We'll rebuild a better one. In 100 years, our city has never experienced anything like your parachute jumps." Continue listening.